Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Aggieville Alleycats podcast, where come rain, shine, or anything in between, we're here to deliver to you the Kansas State sporting news that you so love. I'm Ace Edwards, right alongside
Connor Baltazar.
And welcome to a pretty busy recruiting week in the K-State sphere, where we have 3 new football commits for the 2025 class. And if you're paying attention to KSO or Twitter in general, you notice that there's a big basketball visitor. We're not going to be covering that very much because nothing has happened yet. But it's pretty much just the 3 new 2025 recruits in a brief segment, just sort of wrapping up the Batcats season. But before we get into that, we do want to thank the sponsor of the show, and that is Greg Arthur. If you want to have your name read out at the beginning of the episode, as well as support the show, please be sure to check out the supporters link in our podcast and Twitter bio. But let's dive straight into the first of this set of 2025 commits, and that is the 6'2" corner from Derby, and that is Martell Jackson. And I think all of these guys were offered from camp at K-State. Either that, unless Moyes wasn't, but I think he was.
I think at the very least, 2 of these 3 guys were camp offers. And it wouldn't be, I guess, too shocking if Moyes was already offered, but then camped, and then we pursued harder. But yeah, it's no coincidence that a lot of these commitments are happening right around the time where K-State does a lot of camps.
Yeah. But Martell Jackson was the first one to pop. He saw a little bit of a rise in his recruitment, at least behind the scenes after the camp, but he decided to shut it down and commit to K-State after the camp and after that offer. He's not rated up by On3 yet, but he is rated as a 3-star on both 24/7 and ESPN. And a lot of what I see in Martell Jackson is very, very similar to what I saw with Jacob Parrish. And I mean all the good things I saw with Jacob Parrish, where it's just elite athleticism. But Martell Jackson also has the sort of prototypical frame and length for an outside corner position at 6'2". He just needs time to sort of marinate into that role. So in a lot of ways, he's a very, very similar pickup to Zashawn Rich this previous year in the 24 class. But I really, really like the pickup just based off of the upside alone.
Yeah. I see him as, if we're going to compare between other corner prospects in recent memory, I think the 2 best comparisons are that in terms of polish, he is somewhere in between Zashawn Rich and Donovan McIntosh, I think, because those are 2 corners that are similar build. And I think Martell Jackson comps kind of similarly to McIntosh, because there's not a ton of huddle tape on Martell Jackson, but what little I have seen, he does use his sideline fairly decently. And but he definitely seems to be a bit more skilled than Zashawn Rich, although he's not as athletic as Zashawn Rich, I would say. But he still is, I think, a really intriguing prospect, given his size, which the staff has done a really significant U-turn on the height and length they prefer with corners compared to the Snyder era, where pretty much the entirety of the Snyder era, with very limited exceptions, it was 5'10" and under for corners. But the Kleiman era, it's really the opposite. It's 6 foot and over for most of our corners.
Yeah. And Martell Jackson really just does slide right into that role. And right now, I think that his best trait is he's a very, very good vertical corner, where he can sort of get away with not keeping a hand on the hip and not sort of locking one arm of the receiver, which is something a lot of corners do, but the good ones just don't get caught. And he doesn't do that very well right now, but what he can do is he kind of has Justin Gardner syndrome, where he just has the makeup speed to get in a position to make a play on the ball. So this is a situation, and DB film or DB highlights are notoriously hard to glean anything from, but I like the Jackson pickup. I just if there's going to be a guy in this class that I don't really see contributing for like 2 or 3 years, well, at least with this one, I know what he's going to be, as opposed to Jacob Parrish, where I had no idea. But Martell Jackson's probably a corner that's going to contribute 2 or 3 years down the line.
Yeah, and the one thing that I think is really working in his favor, though, is that when K-State has a guy that camps and they offer and they immediately commit, it's somebody that they think really highly of for one reason or another. So Martell Jackson, he fits perfectly into that mold. Kind of similar, I guess, to Tobias and Sami in terms of how his recruitment went, where he camps, gets offered, and shuts it down pretty quick. But yeah, he's a solid pickup, I think.
Yeah, and also very similar to Tobio is after he commits / gets the K-State offers when his recruitment sort of picks up. By the way, it's not a joke when people – I used to think it was a joke. It's not a joke anymore. Schools legitimately are waiting for the K-State offer to say something about it. It's not a joke anymore. That's just what happens.
Yeah, legit. I think that speaks to the level of talent evaluation that K-State has going on right now at the near.
Yeah. But the next of the 3 commits comes from a highly touted receiver from the powerhouse that is IMG Academy down in Florida. That is Adonis Moyes, the 6', 185 receiver who really reminds, like, he fits the prototype of, if you go back and listen to the episode we did with Drew Galloway talking about our recruiting rankings for the previous year, we talked about Matthew Middleton having a type for receiver. Adonis Moyes, again, fits that type. The only difference is he's a little smaller than JSD and Trey Davis. But he's that guy who's just an insanely talented playmaker who at times is basically just a running back that splits out wide and catches the ball exclusively. And that's not to discount his true receiver skills, because I do like his hands, I do like his route running, but neither of those are going to be his day one game. His day one game is going to be making people, like, striking the fear of God into people on bubble screens, because once he gets the ball in his hands is the moment he becomes one of the most dangerous guys on the field.
Yeah. Adonis Moyes, from what I've been able to glean just from inference, his recruitment's been really interesting because at one point he was kind of blowing up because he went on a visit to like West Virginia, I think. He had offers from Vanderbilt, UCF, Pitt, KU, and a few other schools. Was drawing interest from Clemson and Florida State. And things kind of quieted down because he had a kind of quiet junior season. And again, I'm not 100% sure what happened there, but I'd imagine it's a mix of there's a lot of really good players at IMG and could have been nursing an injury. I mean, that often is a really easy explanation for recruitment kind of dipping a little bit, is a guy just isn't getting on the field. But they had a pro day at IMG. He ran a 4.43 40, had a 34-inch vertical, 4.19 shuttle. L drill was a 6.99. Then his broad jump was 119.1. So he's a very athletic player. And yeah, his film speaks to what you were talking about, which is playmaking ability in space, get the ball in his hands and let him work, basically, which again really fits with Trey Davis and JSD. We've seen 3 major wide receiver targets from Matthew Middleton. They've all kind of been the same guy, and I don't really mind.
No. I mean, because in a modern college football system, in the modern college football landscape, I remember a few years ago, this is a deep poll. We were doing the Tulane preview, and we said something to the effect of, yeah, they're all Sunbelt receivers. And we didn't mean it as like a derogatory. We meant it as they are playmakers who aren't really receivers yet. that's still a valuable skill set in college football. You don't need to be the most refined player, even at the beginning, to be a massive playmaker. I mean, look at Luther Burden, what he did at MU. He's still not the most polished receiver, probably in that room, but he's the only one that's getting a first round projection because he's just a natural playmaker. And that's sort of what Matthew Middleton has been recruiting, which is sort of a interesting little change up from the 1 or 2 years we got of Thad Ward, where we had that class that had every archetype possible. And only one of them is gone now, and that was Wesley Watson. That was the one we were lowest on anyway. But yeah, if you take the skill sets of everyone in the receiver room, you really do have probably one of the most top to bottom. If you were to transfer it to the NFL, you would call it a complete skill set roster, I think is the best way to describe it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of the pickup for Moyes. I'm really interested to see if anything changes with his rankings come senior year, because they are kind of all over the place right now. Like ESPN has him as a 4-star, but On3 has him as like a middle level 3-star. Rivals, he's barely registering on their rankings, but I don't even know if they have like people working for them anymore. So it's kind of all over the place with Adonis Moyes, but I'm really confident in our staff's ability to make evaluations at receiver with guys of that archetype, given that we've got Jace Brown on the roster right now. Trey Spivey, I think, is still really intriguing. And I still really, really like Trey Davis and JSD as well. So I think we've got some really good receiver pieces right now. So I'm looking forward to seeing what we can do with Adonis Moyes.
Yeah. Plus, you have the jump ball specialist and Dre Davis, not to be confused with Trey Davis.
That could pretty easily be confused.
Yeah, we're going to have to – well, who gets the – well –
just call him Andre, I guess.
Yeah, just call him Andre because, yeah, I was about to say you have to have a competition to see who gets the Dre or Trey title before I realized you could just call Andre Davis. But the final of the 3 commits that we're going to be talking about is Dalton Knapp from Grapevine, Texas. He's an edge, a 6'5" edge player. And in my personal, we don't do the ranking special now, but as of right now, Dalton Knapp would probably be my number 1 commit for K-State. And a lot of it comes down to similar stuff that we saw or that we thought Toby O was going to be, where Dalton Knapp just has this insane first step. He's an absurdly explosive athlete off the line of scrimmage. And that's something that you can't teach, that explosiveness. And it's an explosiveness that transfers just about anywhere in the front 6 or front 7, depending on your system. He played just about everywhere on defense, which basically means that he was the best player on his team on defense. That's how you can tell. But Knapp, just his upside intrigues me, but his floor isn't low either. And a lot of that has to do with he knows how to just run around someone, but he also knows that once he gets them set up outside, they're going to start overcorrecting, and then he can just hit them with a spin move. And that was admittedly rare. And is he a perfect prospect? No, because I think his flaw is that he doesn't know how he wants to rush yet, because he can have a plan, but you can kind of tell what the plan is by what stance he starts in. If he starts in a sprinter stance, he's just going to run upfield. If he starts in the Bosa stance, he's going to have a counter move. But yeah, this would be my favorite pickup of the class so far.
Yeah, I really, really like Dalton Knapp as well. I watched his film earlier today, and I was very surprised to see that like 24/7 has him as only like an 84 3-star. And he just got like a token 5.6 3-star from Rivals. So it's like I don't know how closely they watched, because I watched his spring tape and I watched his junior year highlights, and I really liked him. He is really versatile as well. If it were my world, I would have him as a hybrid edge rusher and sandbacker, because I think that he has the versatility to kind of be what we want Rex Van Wy to be in terms of just like stepping in like the RPO window and eliminating that possibility. Because Knapp has really quick hands, especially he had a lot of batted balls when he was rushing the quarterback. He was really good getting his hands up quickly, which that's kind of a tough skill for defenders, is knowing when to get your hands up and jump and when to just go for the quarterback. He was really good at picking the intermediate option, which is getting your hands up and continue running. And he has really, really, really long arms, so he can do that really effectively. So I agree with you. I really like this pickup. I think he's my favorite of the three that we've gotten this week. He also has a really interesting offer list, and I think he was about to go on some more official visits elsewhere.
Yeah,
I think he was going to visit KU. He has a Utah offer. He has Washington State and Oregon State offers. Houston has offered him. So like he has some interesting offers there, and I think I know he goes to a private school in Texas, and I know that private school football in Texas is generally like not seen as prestigious as like public school in Texas, which is kind of interesting. It's an interesting reversal, but I think that maybe if he was playing at a public school, this guy would be a high 3-star, maybe a 4-star, because he's got prototypical size for Power 5 football. He's 6'5". He has a frame to grow into. Really, really, really athletic and strong. That's really probably the main area I guess he can grow in, is probably strength, which high school prospect can't, I suppose. Yeah. Maybe the better.
And plus, growing into the frame, that's also another what high school player can't.
Yeah. So Leonard Fournette, I guess, but like, that doesn't really count.
No, that's an alien that just so happened to play college football.
But I really like Dalton Knapp, and that's another camp offer, another camp eval. And this staff has generally been pretty good at finding diamonds in the rough at defensive end. I mean, Felix is obviously like the big one, but I mean, we still have like Chidi Obiizor, who like we haven't seen everything from him yet, but he also is just going into year 2, and I think we all think pretty highly of him. Travis Bates out of the portal, he was like kind of unheralded, and he's kind of sneaking up on people's radar. The staff can really identify some good talent at edge rusher. So
Ryan Davis too.
Ryan Davis before he got mono.
I'm still so upset that
pretty much that entire 2022 defensive end class can really quality. Malcolm Alcorn Crowder, I guess, if we even use him in that way anymore, which we may not because he's already putting on weight. So he'll end up being more of a Jalen Pickle type of D end, if anything. But even then, that's almost a stretch at this point.
Yeah. So here's a question for you, and I have my answer. Are you taking the senior high school version of Ryan Davis or the senior high school version of Dalton Knapp? I'm taking Davis, but I also was probably the highest person on Ryan Davis on earth, maybe outside of his parents. It's
a pretty good question, and I'm tempted to take Davis, but honestly, I might take Knapp, mainly pretty much for one reason, two reasons alone. I think he has a quicker first step and he has longer arms, even though Ryan Davis is undoubtedly a more finished product. Out of high school, I was watching his senior tape and I was like, this guy is going to play year 1 and be like Big 12 all freshman. And then he got mono and lost 40 pounds or something crazy like that. But
yeah, him and Knapp weighed the same at some point.
Yeah, so it's really unfortunate. But no, I think I'd take Knapp, but not by a lot. And that's a good problem to have, I guess, high school Ryan Davis or Dalton Knapp right now.
Yeah. But that wraps up the 2025 commits. I guess we can talk a little bit about the basketball visitor, although nothing has really happened with it yet. That's Coleman Hawkins, the transfer from Illinois. He did visit K State. He has not committed to K State yet, though it appears likely he probably will.
Yeah. There seems to be a ton of momentum around that recruitment. I really, really hope that we get Coleman Hawkins, because I am of the opinion that if we do get Coleman Hawkins, that we will be a top 25 team, or at least we should be. We won't actually be ranked preseason top 25, but I would think that we should be. But I won't be surprised when we are. But I think that next year it's definitely a tournament team with Coleman Hawkins. We'd be a really tall team as well, because he's probably going to be our guy on the wing. And then we're probably going to also have a Chor and Ugana and Yenso in the starting lineup as well. So that's like 3 guys that are 6'9" or taller, which is like bordering on like John Calipari, Kentucky levels of tall. So,
and none of them are aircraft carriers. So
yeah, none of them are aircraft carriers. The only one he can even make that argument for is on Yenso, and he's actually capable of running the floor. So he's more of like a battleship, I guess. I don't know, or a cruiser maybe, but not an aircraft carrier.
But yeah, I would keep my eye out on that recruitment. I would also subscribe to KSO, which it seems like every week we do a plug for KSO. They do good work. Maybe just avoid the boards, because sometimes they start talking about condiments and.
Yeah, I was gonna say that for what it's worth, the Coleman Hawkins thread is kind of really descended into something odd and strange. But I mean, what thread among us?
I mean, everything is wrong and nothing will ever be right again. But we can move into the basically a little season wrap up for the Batcats, who unfortunately did end up falling and getting knocked out of the NCAA tournament by Virginia. I don't want to dwell on those 2 games because it's over. That's pretty much the best way that we can describe it. It's not like we're giving a preview or we're covering it because they're playing again. No, the team is done. And given how we felt in the middle of the season, this is even, I would say, if you told me that we made the Supers before the season, I would have been happy. And I am happy. I am happy that we made the Super Regional, because the talent on the roster was a Super Regional team. And, it didn't end how they wanted it to, because, not everyone gets to go out on top. In fact, very, very, very few people get to. But the talent on the roster got us to that point. And, I have an appreciation for that.
Yeah. I'm going to really miss a lot of these players. Kalen Culpepper's already declared for the draft, which is not a surprise at all. I don't think there was anybody on earth that thought he was going to come back, because he's going to go be a first-round pick, and he's going to go be a Gold Glove shortstop in like 4 years or something. And he has earned it, and that's going to help elevate K-State's status in the baseball world. Not just the results of getting to the Super Regionals, but guys like Kalen Culpepper getting drafted in the first round, like Jordan Wicks just a little bit ago, who has finally returned to the MLB and made a relief appearance a few days ago. But I mean, we're at Tyson Neighbors. He's going to go get drafted. Jack Wentworth probably will. Brady Day will. Brendan Jones probably will as well. So it's going to be a good offseason in terms of getting guys drafted to the majors. And then it's going to be interesting to watch this roster construct itself over the next little bit. A lot of new faces for next year. But this year, I mean, we can hang our hat on sweeping a regional that we had like a less than 1% chance of winning going into it. And then despite going down in 2 straight games to Virginia, we really held our own in both of those games, and I think gave Virginia a pretty good run for their money for the most part. Really, if their fence was like 5 feet shorter, we probably hit like 20 home runs that weekend. But just a lot of warning track power, unfortunately. But still, it was a good way to end the season on a still losing, but making it to the Supers for the second time in program history. I think it's fair to say that's a high note. Second furthest a team's ever made it. Losing a lot, but now we're going to kind of be a fairly decent destination, I think, for some transfers, some instant impact guys. That's the one upside in the portal era of losing a lot is you can sell playing time. That's how you get a guy like Owen Borma in the portal. Granted, he was D3, so I don't know how heavily he was being pursued, but that's also how you get a guy like Chuck Ingram, who was extremely valuable in the regionals after, and he could have just hung it up and phoned it in after having a really rough back end of the regular season. But no, he flipped a switch and was great in the regionals and super regionals. So he deserves a ton of credit for that. But yeah, this was a fun Batcats team that, like pretty much all baseball teams, frustrated their fans at a lot of points because there's really not a baseball team on there's very few baseball fans on earth that don't think their team sucks. Yeah. That is the burden of playing 162 games MLB and then like 70 games or however many it is, 50, 60 games in college is you lose a lot because you play a lot. So it just feels like you're constantly losing, and sometimes you actually are, but sometimes it just isn't your day. Yeah. And it was the Cats' day for regionals in Fayetteville. It wasn't their day out in Charlottesville, but still had a fantastic season. Can hold their heads high.
Yeah, this is not a season to be ashamed of, and I know that we got a question about it on Ask the Alleycats previous week about what we think of for the next year's team, and I think you put it very well that we have a lot to sell. Which we got a portal commit already. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it because that's more of a wait until the roster is done kind of thing. But we already do have a transfer pitcher coming in Carson Liggett. But you also have a lot of intriguing pieces for next year, like AJ Avasco. Is it Shintaro Inoue?
Yeah.
Who was drawing some lofty comparisons on Twitter.
Yeah. Let me see if I screenshotted that tweet, but it was crazy what that guy was saying.
Yeah, I can stall while you look for it. But
I found it.
Okay.
A guy that analyzes international baseball. He was saying that he thinks that Shintaro Inoue can be like the best infielder or the best like Japanese infielder in like college baseball history or something like that, which
is crazy.
That is a nuts thing to say. Which, granted, he had like a 1238 OPS, 54 walks to 41 strikeouts in 2 years in JUCO. Like having a positive walk to strikeout ratio is kind of nuts in of itself. But so like there's some names there. Then there's guys like Ty Smolinski, Micah Dean. We didn't see at all this year, and he was pretty well thought of prospect. Mason Buss's brother, Nolan Buss, he's going to be joining the squad. Chandler Murray is supposed to be really good. He's a first baseman from Hawaii. There's a lot of intriguing guys. So like we'll keep selling it as that. This year the sell was this is going to be a really talented team that can make the postseason. Next year's sell is going to be there's going to be a lot of really fun players that we're going to be able to get to know. And when we know for sure that Casey has a great culture in the clubhouse. So it's going to be fun to hopefully watch some of these guys stick around for a little while.
Yeah. It's going to be a fun team in the same way that most Pete Hughes teams have been fun in that they, as a car alarm goes off, but
It's
Here's
hailing here, so somebody's in for a really rough time. We should probably wrap this up. I'm going to mute myself.
okay. Yeah, that pretty
It's
much.
done, actually. It just got done.
Oh, that's sick. So I can ask this last little question for you. This is to shamelessly steal from Cocaine Willie and just dudes talking ball for this upcoming, because this year athletically is done. How do you rank? Like, give me your top 3 seasons that you're most excited for this upcoming athletic year.
That is super tough because, for one, I'm always excited for K-State sports, no matter the sport. But there's so many that ended up having quietly good seasons. Like track and field had a really good 4x4 team this year. Women's golf, very, very quietly, completely under the radar, had like a second team All-American in Carla Burnett. Like, I've not seen anybody really talking about that, but she like went out and made like the NCAA tournament as an individual and like won the Big 12 individually, I think. Like that just kind of came out of nowhere. Baseball is going to be super fun next year. Volleyball has 3 high impact transfers coming in from Kentucky, Pepperdine, and LSU, and brings back Aaliyah Carter and Clinton. Sholshevsky's back, yeah. Nia Clinton's back. I mean, volleyball is going to be super fun. I'm a little biased towards that because I'm probably going to be at a lot of games because like it's going to be in town. I'll just have a couple hours to kill on weeknights sometimes. So like I'm excited for that. Football, Avery Johnson's there. Men's basketball, the roster is already looking really good. Women's basketball, Poindexter's and Yoki's back. The Glenn twins and Sundell. I think the better question is, what sports aren't we excited for? Like,
Yeah.
Like, even, you know what? I'll do a quick tennis shout out. I saw they got 2 transfers and they actually weren't horrid this year. They were, I would say, slightly below average this year, which is a massive step up.
Yeah.
So I'll give them their flowers here because they earned that.
Yeah, there is one sport I'm not excited for, but we'll leave that to the listener's interpretation. But
I mean, we've listed pretty much every other sport.
Yep, we sure have. But
rowing. I hope they have fun.
I do too. But for me, the season I'm most excited for is women's basketball because I was annoying last year. Oh.
It's going to be a brutal off season.
Yeah. It's going to be bad because like pretty much every major contributor except for one is back. Plus we replaced the one missing contributor with someone who, no disrespect, is undoubtedly better.
Yeah, I think maybe I'll put that in a more diplomatic way, even though what you said wasn't incorrect. I'm gonna say she fits what the team needs more efficiently.
That's the kinder way of putting it.
Yeah, positional value for what we need is higher.
There we go. That's the perfect way to say it. But second for me would probably be football. And then third place is where I'm struggling because everything else is like the same level of very excited. I'm struggling picking between. Okay, if we're going off of just like pure excitement and what I want to see, I'm really interested to see what the Batcats next year look like. That doesn't mean that like I think they're going to be the most successful because I think they'll be a fine and young team. Yeah. So I will go Batcats, but the other contenders were men's basketball and volleyball because the Volleycats that's another team that is going to be ridiculous.
If you're listening to this and haven't watched a volleyball match in the Morgue, which I do think is probably the best K-State like arena shortened nickname, like because like there's the Bill and the Bram, but I think the Morgue is undoubtedly the best.
Yeah. I will die before I call Toynton the Toint.
I refuse categorically on ethical grounds. I won't do it. But no, the Morgue for volleyball is an incredible venue. It definitely looks super ugly and bad on the outside, but that's because they spent all the money on making the inside an incredible space for volleyball. And I made it to like a couple games last year, and I want to make it to as many as possible this year because it is just an incredible time to watch K-State play there. We had a genuine, really good home court advantage last year. That's why we were able to get so many ranked wins at home for volleyball. I'm going on a volleyball rant now, but
that's fine.
I mean, yeah,
I invited it.
I guess that's true. But we're like now in like kind of the 2-month part of the year where there's nothing K-State related really going on for the most part, other than football recruiting. Are they doing the summer window signing thing, or is that next summer when that starts?
I can't remember. I think it might be next summer.
That's probably right because we haven't really heard anything about it this year. But yeah, a brief impromptu wacky segment of the week.
Okay.
The All-State 12 conference. How are we feeling about that?
If it keeps the Big 12 like even remotely in the same hemisphere as like the Big 10 and SEC. I don't mean in competitiveness because I think people have started conflating media value to competitiveness. It's not. Please stop that narrative. But I could make myself okay with it so long as it's like the Big 12 brought to you by Allstate or something, and it's not like the Allstate 12 or something.
Oh yeah, I'm with you on that. I mean, ultimately, I guess I'll just make myself okay with it if it's the All-State 12, even though that sounds really stupid. But if they're willing to pay for it, by all means, go for it, All-State. But I think the whole thing is silly. But that's just kind of the sign of the times. So if it helps K-State at the end of the day, it's not that big a deal to me. I'm not going to complain about it too much. Even I might make fun of the name. But I won't. I'll try not to complain very much.
Yeah, I'm just excited for the Saudi oil money 12.
Well, I guess we could hold out for the OPEC sponsorship, but we'll see.
Do you have any final notes before we inevitably dive into the next few weeks of just talking football recruiting and then probably Alleycat hypotheticals and maybe 2 guests?
I've got nothing else to add.
All right. Well, if that's the case, thank you all for listening to this episode of the Aggieville Alleycats podcast. If you want to follow or contact the show, you can follow us just about anywhere at Aggieville Alleycats. And if you want to email us, we're AggievilleAlleycats@gmail.com. If you want to follow us on a more personal note, I'm at ACEdward00.
I'm at Connor Balthazar, capital C, capital B.
And if you want to support the show financially, please be sure to check out the official Aggieville Alleycats merch store and the supporters link in our podcast and Twitter's bios. But most importantly, thank you all for listening to this episode of the Aggieville Alleycats podcast. Where come rain, shine, or anything in between, we're here to deliver to you the Kansas State sporting news you so love. Stay safe, Alleycats.